Guys, let's get started. I'm going to analyze some opportunities for you today. All right. We're going to talk about Bitcoin, about Ethereum, and maybe some altcoins if the video doesn't get too long. Okay. So I'll focus on sharing setups both for intraday and swing trading. All right. Maybe I'll also give a high time frame HTF perspective. Okay. Alongside that, I'll share some opportunities that have even been discussed here in the communities. All right. Our main focus is on the VIP group, but I'll also share some things in the free group. Okay. So stick around and watch the video until the end. Let's get started. First, I'm going to take a look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin in the past few days had a very strong impulsive move, right? The market was in an accumulation phase, and then the momentum shifted to the upside suddenly, really quickly. So the market is now consolidating, and we might have some opportunities here, considering that Bitcoin still hasn't come down to close the 4-hour order block, the first interesting demand zones here. The price hasn't mitigated them yet. However, it did mitigate this FVG that was open on the 4-hour chart, swept internal liquidity and broke structure. Okay. This shift in flow, right? The market started to accumulate, swept liquidity, and then shifted flow again on the LTF. This shift in flow in character is interesting, but it's internal, it's happening within an accumulation range, which gives us a possible opportunity, okay? However, it's a high risk opportunity for us to be building a buy position in this region here, all right? In this order block, it's a riskier setup, but it's a setup that can work, okay? It's a setup that would have context for us to create, all right? So it would be this setup, okay? You can either set your take here or set your take at the first order block at this order block as well, which is interesting, all right? It's also where we could be looking for a possible short setup, okay? This order block, you won't be able to see it clearly here on the 4-hour chart, okay? However, if you switch to the 1-hour chart, you can understand the context of why it's important, all right? So the price made, right, this internal liquidity sweep down here at these lows, okay? The price came down, swept this liquidity and formed this low. This low caused the price to rise and sweep the liquidity from this high, okay? So in a way, this low became a strong low on an LT on a lower time frame in this case. So right from the moment this price was broken, from the moment this low was broken here, it gives us the possibility to, you know, trade this order block. Okay. So what position could we set up here? Okay, we could set up the following trade here. Let's switch to the 4-hour chart so we can get a better view here. All right, we could take this, the upper part, and place our stop loss above the ATH and extend our take profit to the 112,000 region, okay, in the demand zone, taking into account that if the price comes to visit this order block, it will sweep a lot of internal liquidity and the price could make a bigger move, okay? It's a possibility and it's also an extremely risky setup, okay? Considering that we would be going against, right, the upward flow, right? So the take profit would actually be quite large if it were here. The correct thing would be to have it at this low here, okay? The next setup we could have on Bitcoin, right, would be this setup here, okay? We're going to take a trade in this order block, okay, in this demand zone where it's converging, right, with our OT zone. In other words, we would be entering here around 0.70, so that we have an interesting risk reward ratio, okay? So it would be between 112,000 and 111,000, okay? We would set our take profit at the ATH. Why at the H? Because we would be going with the HTF flow, right? So it would be a more interesting trade. So that's another possibility we could have with Bitcoin, okay? For Bitcoin, for now, that's what we have, okay? We need to keep monitoring it to see how things develop over the week, all right? And stick to risk management because the market is really, really complex right now. Retail investors are coming in heavily and they'll probably be led into making mistakes, right? So we need to be very careful not to follow along with them, okay? For Ethereum, here's the situation. The price hasn't swept our internal liquidity, nor has it mitigated the block we had identified here, right? Which would be this block. So what can we expect here with Ethereum? To cover those previous readings that were made. With Ethereum, here's the thing. Ethereum swept the internal liquidity here at this BC. The BC is a flow reversal on the LTF, but it's also liquidity, right? It's on the 4-hour time frame, okay? So the price swept liquidity and broke the structure. And now the price is coming back to do a pullback in this region. So let's see here where an interesting region would be. The first interesting region for Ethereum would be between 3,670 and 3,600, okay? So we could set up a trade here, right? A high risk one with a stop loss at 3,500 and our take profit would be at 4,130, got it? This would be an extremely high risk setup on Ethereum, okay? We don't have a short setup on Ethereum, all right? For now, that's not an option because the market hasn't reversed its flow yet, right? The market remains bullish, so we would have to trade in favor of this upward trend, okay? If this first setup here doesn't work, since the price got very close to this order block and didn't mitigate it, but did create a new low, which would be a strong low, all right? So if this strong low here gets broken, we could probably see a change in the flow, all right? We could see the trend shift maybe to a slightly bigger correction, right? If this low here gets broken. So I wouldn't buy at this order block here, okay? It's quite likely that I would wait to buy in the lower region, all right? This area here also seems like a interesting region for us to build a position. Let me take a look here. 33,300 to 3,100. Yeah, but it's a region that's still pretty far away, okay? So I don't think it's worth looking for positions in that area for now. If the price drops below 3,500, then I'll make a new update. All right? So you all can stay alert. However, for now, it doesn't make sense to take a position here around 3,300. It's still quite far from the current price. That would be a drop of almost 15%, right? It's true that dominance is in an interesting area here to start an upward trend, but it's still not the right time to take a position in Ethereum at 3,300. But if the price suddenly drops there, it's an interesting region to start building a position between 3,300 and 3,100. Very interesting. This demand zone here is much more attractive. However, it's still quite far from the current price, okay? Let's take a look at BNB because BNB also has an interesting setup, all right? It's the last altcoin I'm going to. It's the last analysis I'm going to do. The video is already long, almost 10 minutes. Let's do a detailed analysis. Price was in a uptrend, swept internal liquidity. This liquidity was generated because of this break, right? What we call a fake BOS, which I write as boss in lowercase, okay? So from the moment the price came and swept this liquidity and broke this structure, then we have a trading range, okay? This trading range is very interesting for us to be trading, right? So we have internal liquidity at this low. We have internal liquidity at this low, okay? Yeah, there's liquidity here too, a little less liquidity, but it's still liquidity, all right? So we could effectively draw our Fibonacci sequence from the very base to the absolute top and precisely identify where our specific area of significant interest would truly be, right? Our primary area of interest, the specific zone we are focusing on, would be precisely located here, situated strategically between the significant numerical markers of 787 and 767. This particular range, this crucial interval, is where we would ideally be looking to establish and initiate our long positions, carefully setting up our buy orders for potential future gains. You could choose the upper base, right, which would be 787, and then your stop loss would be a bit larger, okay? It varies if I take the upper part, yeah, or choose the 0.70 region 700 and the Fibonacci, because then the price would have already swept both liquidities, okay? You could place your stop loss at this lower part, below this strong bottom, okay? And your take profit could be at the top. If the market moves strongly in that direction, we could extend this take profit, okay? This is a possible setup we have for BNB, considering that Bitcoin remains strong and that dominance either continues accumulating here or has a slight increase for this pullback to happen, right? But we need to stay alert because this week there's an interest rate decision, there's a meeting of so there will probably be a lot of volatility, okay? So that's it, folks. God bless you all. May God bless each and every one of you.